Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Tim Klauser, with the Center Square's Washington State Capitol correspondent, Carlene Johnson, here to talk about a recent story of hers and part of a larger piece of coverage that independent journalist Brandi Kruse has touched on recently as well, breaking the story earlier this week. Essentially, this state housing program that provides grants to the minority community so that they can get homes has been certain nonprofits and those nonprofit employees. Carlene, there's a whole lot to break down here. Why don't you run us through it all?
Yeah, this does go back to the whistleblower here, the woman that I interviewed for my story, who's a local realtor, Corey Orvold. She started raising concerns back in January of this year and trying to get some media attention to this. But it is a complicated story. She's a realtor. She is half Black herself, and she had some clients that she wanted to be able to take advantage of the Community Reinvestment Program. You mentioned it is a race-based program. Certain minority groups, Blacks, Hispanics, certain Latinos, are able to get these low interest or no interest loans, debt relief, in some cases, helping them to prevent foreclosure of a property that they may already own. So she wanted her clients, minority clients, to be able to take advantage of it. So she started reaching out to the Community Reinvestment Program run by State Commerce. State Commerce oversees this program, and there are about a dozen different NGOs that help operate the Community Reinvestment Program, and also the related but separate Covenant Homeownership Program, which we've written about extensively at the Center Square. That one's being challenged legally because they exclude, while they allow some minority groups to take advantage of it, they exclude others. Some Asian minority groups, some Jewish groups that also faced housing discrimination in the past are excluded from it. All that to say, she was taking her clients, Corey Orvold was taking her clients to these NGOs and saying, can we apply? And they were saying, well, no, not really. The first 30 days after we get our money this year, only certain groups can apply. That took it to the next level. Okay, why? Why are only certain individuals allowed to apply? And why are certain realtors excluded from participation? She started seeing some things that were very concerning. Names of folks that indications were that folks that run these NGOs were maybe doing some self-dealing, giving loans, grants, debt relief to their family members. Seems like an obvious conflict of interest there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole story was very interesting. The fact that the state or these nonprofits, the 12 or so NGOs that you said are in charge of distributing these taxpayer funds to the minority community. I mean, they told, I believe, the whistleblower that, we only work with preferred lenders or preferred brokers, which is very interesting. It excludes a large portion, but then, as you mentioned, those nonprofits, their employees, and even the employees' family members, in some cases, were awarded this funds despite telling other people that they had just run out of the money.
Absolutely. And the Seattle Urban League, the Tacoma Urban League are two of the biggest players in all of this. And as soon as the whistleblower, Corey Orvold, who, by the way, as I mentioned, she's Black, and she's bringing clients that were Black and other minority members saying, hey, can we get a piece of the pie here too? Now, you can have your criticisms of, these race-based programs, as many people do, basically saying it's the equivalent to reparations. So outside of that argument, you've got a giant pot of money that's sitting there. The initial influx of money for this, Tim, that came from, now lawmakers passed this program. They set aside initially $200 million. Now another $60 million has gone into it. So $260 million over about a 3 to 5 year period. That's a big chunk of change. It seems like that you could help a lot of people with this. The problem is when you have the NGOs maybe doing some insider dealing, giving to their own family members. In one case, the Seattle Urban League woman who's in charge of this program, made certain that her own daughter received not only money from the Community Reinvestment Program, but then also a separate program to offer a loan with which she was able to then purchase a very nice vehicle last year, but then also a separate loan from the Covenant Home Ownership Program, such that she was able to purchase a home valued at more than $460,000 and only has a mortgage owed on that remaining of $89,000. So she got a lot of money.
I saw
Go ahead.
I saw the records in your story. You kind of break it down that it was $350,000 in taxpayer funds that this one person was given, despite her mother serving the nonprofit that was allocating those taxpayer funds. I mean, it seems like an obvious conflict of interest, but I found it also interesting in Brandi's story. She kind of went through the contracting process and said, technically, there's no clause in there that ameliorates these agreements or strikes them if they're doing this. So technically, they weren't committing any crimes, but I mean, it's obviously an ethical violation, no?
That's the question, and it's more than just an ethical violation based on I was sent a contract from the Washington State Department of Commerce. Again, they oversee all these NGOs. They're kind of washing their hands of it. They know they're probably going to be on the hook now for not having greater oversight, right? Not making sure that these NGOs are operating on the up and up. They sent me the contract. It's like 130 pages or something. And on page 23, it very specifically says they can't be giving loans, debt relief, other, taxpayer funds to family members and friends. It says that on page 23. And I included, that quote in my article this week. So while they're saying, it's not our fault, these guys have signed a contract. The NGOs have to sign this contract that says we're going to operate on the up and up. So Commerce is now kind of washing their hands of it. The NGOs, they claim, are not supposed to be doing this, but they have been, and nobody has stopped them, right? So until this courageous whistleblower, Corey Orvold, spoke up and started unraveling this stuff and herself getting all the documentation. I mean, she spends months getting public records back from Commerce and communications between the Urban League and Commerce. She spent months doing this, but nobody was paying attention. And not only that, what's worse, Tim, is they started personally attacking her. They tried to get her realtor's license yanked by the state, saying that she was out of line with some of the assertions that she was making, because she was complaining, saying, hey, you guys are only using your preferred lenders, your preferred realtors, excluding her clients and giving, as you mentioned, giant chunks of money to very small numbers of individuals. Why not spread that out, right? They could have helped potentially hundreds of more people qualify for these, for these taxpayer funds, instead helping very select few. They attacked her, went after her personally. She told me in my interview, I didn't include this in the article, Tim, but she was finding people parked outside her home, such that her husband had to increase security for their home and her personal safety. I mean, she felt very personally attacked and her livelihood attacked, when all she did was try and, sound the alarm. So thankfully, Brandi Kruse has exposed this. We were able to piggyback on that and expose this as well. And I think this is going to be a huge issue for the future. You've got state lawmakers that are already introducing legislation. By the way, one of them, State Representative Travis Couture, has tried to, for the last 2 years in a row, offer a couple pieces of legislation that have failed to even get a public hearing. The hope is now, with this additional exposure, pressure on the Department of Commerce and lawmakers to hopefully at least allow a public hearing to correct this stuff, because there's been so little oversight. Somebody's got to be watching for these NGOs. And the ones that have, if in fact here there's criminal wrongdoing and self-dealing, these operators should be held accountable for that. They shouldn't be given hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, and finding out that they may be doing, self-dealing. These folks shouldn't be in those positions, and they should be held to account. And the public, I think, is going to demand that now.
Yeah, I mean, Corey, as a person of the minority community, advocating for her clients to use this program. I mean, you said it. They tried to revoke her real estate license. You also mentioned in the story that they were calling her mental health into question. Some complaints even said that she wasn't Black enough, which I found particularly interesting. I mean, to be able or to go out advocating for your own clients to use this program for directly what it was intended for, and then to be chastised by many of these nonprofits that otherwise they saw in a good light. I mean, it's very interesting and definitely something that we're going to continue to have our eyes on as you and Brandi continue to report on this. I remember seeing in Brandi's story that Corey had said, look, there's enough to keep journalists busy for well over a year if they continue to dig into all this. And I'm sure you will, Carlene.
To be on it.
I'm sure Brandi will as well.
There's so many salvos on this, Tim. She resigned her position. Corey did with Tacoma Urban League. She said that some of the leadership there told her, in a face-to-face conversation, our hands are not clean in this either. So they're conceding that they know what they've been doing is wrong, and we're going to expose it. It's not just the Seattle Urban League. It's not just the Tacoma Urban League. Many of these other NGOs, have some questionable dealings, and we're going to be covering it. There's probably going to be a series of 3 or 4 more articles in the weeks to come.
Well, I look forward to reading those. And for anyone else that wants to catch Carlene's coverage, you can read it at thecentersquare.com. But otherwise, I'll see you for another episode of Washington in Focus in the future. Thank you.